Hey everybody, Tyler here, back with James, and we just got done watching probably one of the movies that we've been looking forward to for the longest time. We got up real early in the morning, first showing, you know it, it's Drug King, Maya Kwang.
Yeah.
Wow, huge cast. I mean, we cannot even get into how many people were in this movie.
It's definitely an ensemble cast. I don't want to attempt to name everybody that's in this movie, but
yeah, it's a period piece. Takes place in the 70s, which is, I thought, one of the big highlights of this movie is how they were, the recreation of that 70s atmosphere and vibe, especially in Busan.
it's based on the trafficking of methamphetamines from Korea to Japan during that period, and there was this sudden boom of crystal meth, which was known as Philippon or Hwilopong in Korea. And Song Kang-ho's character is this up-and-coming, kind of like small-time, jeweler, criminal type of guy who, gets involved in the meth business, the meth trade.
Yeah, very ambitious, super hardworking, but he doesn't really have a moral compass to guide him. He's just kind of following the money.
Yeah.
And one thing after another, he finds himself sometimes just accidentally, but climbing up the criminal ladder of drug distribution, and he makes all these connections throughout this movie, which we'll get into, the amount of connections that he makes. But obviously, like James said, based on the title, he becomes the drug king of, I would say, Korea, and probably very, very well known throughout Japan.
Supposed to be the undisputed drug king of that time. I don't know if his character was an actual real person, or if he's like a composite character that's based on several real life people, but
I would have to go more with the composite.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the parts that this film is based in history is more of the setting, and a lot of the political factors that sort of play into the story, some of the implications of criminality that kind of bridged over into the political sector.
Yeah.
I would call this movie a saga, if anything. It's one of those movies that's a 10-year chronicle.
Yeah.
So we do actually get to see some of those real big moments in Korean history, a lot of the citizens' protests against the government, which
student demonstrations.
we're all very familiar with now. Especially this year, there was a lot of that with 1987, Taxi Driver, well, that was last year, but same time period. So that's, I think, the real based in history. And there was this crazy drug aspect of it that is kind of unique to watch because it's in Korea.
Right. I think the template of the movie itself is actually very familiar. If you've seen other Hollywood films before, or just other films outside of Korea that are based on based around drug trafficking and drug kingpins and such and so forth. There were aspects of SCARFACE, and I also got vibes of
American Gangster.
American Gangster, yes. There were a lot of similar beats to that movie, and so just like you mentioned, it's interesting to see this premise being implemented into a Korean film, because Korea as a country isn't necessarily known for its illegal narcotics trade. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's not one of those countries that's really infamous for the amount of drugs that that it traffics or anything like that. Although it obviously this movie shows that there was a history of that at one point, but it's just something that we're not really necessarily accustomed to.
Yeah, I mean, there was Believer that came out earlier this year that also gave me that similar unique vibe of like a very drug-focused movie in Korea. It's not something we're used to seeing.
Yeah, but
background.
But that's a fictitious movie, and that's
right.
This is actually based on real events and things that actually did take place in Korea's history.
But James, off the bat, what are some of your favorite things about Drug King? What impressed you the most?
Unquestionably, the thing I was impressed with the most in this film is the acting, by far. And that's kind of something that I expected, because you always expect Song Kang-ho to bring his A game no matter what film he's in. So
Definitely
that wasn't
one of my
even,
favorites.
him acting, acting well in a film, it's almost a moot point.
Yeah, Song Kang-ho is one of the things about this movie that really carries it, because he is a rock throughout all of it. I mean, I think I can very confidently say this is one of his better all-around performances, because we see all those sides of him, the quirky side. Because this is a 10-year spanning movie, he ages in the film. He starts, a lot of his life choices begin to wear on him, the experiences. So he gets that crotchety, crazy kingpin level at the end. Bae Doona in this movie was stunning. She really brings a whole new level to this, and actually her character gets probably the most screen time after Song Kang-ho, even though she comes in like midway point in the movie. Yeah. But she was a big highlight for me in this one.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, she's definitely the most memorable out of the supporting cast.
But there's one other character that I want to talk about, which was the prosecutor, and how we mentioned it. We thought it could have been going for that American Gangster vibe, where they're going to bring his story almost on an equal level. Yeah. And so you kind of you're rooting for both of them, but they left a lot of his story or backstory out.
And that's like what I was expecting when they first introduced him, because they introduced him like he was going to be like a major player in the story, right? And even the way that like the story was cutting back and forth between Song Kang-ho's character and the prosecutor, but.
So I could predict if they do have a director's cut, we might see more of his story.
Yeah, but in this cut right now, since it is the theatrical cut that we saw, and I think that it ultimately is the most important cut, because it's the one that the public is exposed to from the beginning. Yeah, that should be the one that matters, right? That should be, his arc, he doesn't get really much of an arc at all, besides trying to catch, nail Song Kang-ho's character.
Yeah, he was an interesting character too, because he was like a badass in everything. He would judo throw people. Yeah, he could suddenly be good with a gun. He's doing a lot of detective work.
Even the entire cast, pretty much. I was impressed with everybody's acting in this movie. Yeah. There was not one person that I felt like, oh, yeah, you know what I mean? So
it was cool, because like Inside Men, this movie's characters all have sort of those unique eccentricities to them, that it's a little subtle thing thrown in, like the one, he was like the Korean Yakuza type skinny boss guy. He's got all the tattoos on him.
Yeah.
He's always like, drinking a can of tomato juice. Yeah. Not explained, it's just this sort of quirky thing.
So random.
Right, very random, but one thing that I really liked about this movie, all the characters, they sort of had a little ism. One thing that it's about this movie, since it is, like I keep saying, chronicled over 10 years, and how we meet so many characters, because it goes very step by step through the process of becoming the drug king. Characters come in and out of this guy's life, and sometimes they disappear forever, sometimes they come back randomly for certain plot points. But yeah, Bae Doona's character, what was it, like midway point in the film?
Pretty much. It was pretty deep into the film where we finally get introduced to her character, because we also spent a lot of time with Song Kang-ho's character's original wife in the film, who also, she acted her ass off in the movie. There's a couple scenes in the film.
Favorite,
for sure.
For the whole movie. But on the flip side, with all of those characters coming and going,
man, I had such a hard time keeping up with any of these side characters, because there are just so many of them. They're just constantly coming and going. Not nearly, like, no time is spent on any of them, really. So by the time once they pop up again, I was like, oh yeah, who was this character again? I forgot this guy was even in this movie.
There were some faces that were hard to recall when they first appeared.
Yeah.
And then we would get introduced to somebody. I'm like, okay, now this is the main guy. And then they go away. Because Song Kang-ho's character kind of has this, he will use what he needs to build to the next level, and then, could stay, could go. A lot of times they go.
I couldn't help but feel like that this was probably originally like a 3-hour plus film, and a lot of stuff was left on the editing room floor.
In a very similar way that the director's previous film, Inside Men, was actually re-released in theaters with a director's cut, which was how much longer?
It's a good 30, 40 minutes longer.
It's quite a bit longer, and most people praise the director's cut over the theatrical cut of Inside Men, from what I heard.
I've seen both cuts of the film, and I would say even the theatrical cut didn't feel quite as disjointed as this film.
We do get a lot of year markers, but the year markers didn't feel that significant.
They're not consistent though, because there's certain scenes where they're not shown. They don't use that at all, and even for certain locations,
right?
Yeah, you have no idea where they actually are.
We do get a couple location specifications, but a lot of times we're left wondering where exactly this is and at what point in time. And during those montages, which I really liked, it wasn't clear how much time was passing. Because there is a few steps that he kind of misses to become the ultimate drug king.
The progression is really quick.
It's really quick.
Really quick. And that's what I mean when I say that I feel like a lot of things were edited out from this film. Like,
so we might be able to expect a director's cut at some point.
Possibly. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Yeah,
I feel
definitely. Like if any movie does it, it's going to be a movie like this.
Yeah, it's such a. There's so much stuffed into a film that's only a little bit over 2 hours, and so much ground that they're trying to cover. Yeah, and that's another thing. I don't know how you felt about this, but I didn't really feel much of an emotional connection with any of the characters in this film, and I think that's again due to the fact that the movie's so overstuffed and there's so many characters and not enough time is spent on any of them.
Yeah.
And even Song Kang-ho's character, we don't really get to learn that much about him. Like, we see his progression as a character from, lowly criminal to drug kingpin, but there's not much under that surface that's really shown in the film. It's a tricky thing to balance in a movie like this when it's dealing with, subject matter. How do we approach it in a way where it's not totally glorifying this lifestyle, and at the same time the movie also needs to be able to build a relationship with the audience and the main character so that we have some type of there's some type of emotional catharsis at the end when you do see this person's eventual downfall, right? Because that's always the
you know it's coming.
You know it's coming, right? It's not. This isn't even a spoiler, like, but yeah, I don't know if I really quite got that with this film.
Yeah, I think the film is really trying to be a chronicle of a time in Korea, a decade, really. Very interesting, difficult time. A lot of things changed, and it was the way that it focused on this drug aspect. It's like, all right, is it trying to make a broader statement about the time, or is it trying to make a more poignant statement about this character? And I feel like this is just more of the broader statement I got in general. As looking at it as a whole, it's pretty impressive. But when you really try to break it down, it's harder to. It's like I don't know if I'm going to remember this character as much as I'm just going to appreciate watching it again.
Because even with like a scumbag character like this, if the character is developed and has the proper arc and is approached in the right way, you'll still.
There should be something within us kind of rooting for him.
Yeah, exactly. Even though you don't want to.
Right.
But that's usually, the sign of good storytelling with this type of film.
Right. I wasn't rooting for him as much as I wanted to in some of the final sequences. But I think one of the biggest highlights and the most praise I can say for this movie is just the watchability factor. It looks so good. It sounds amazing. I loved the soundtrack. I'll probably buy it. It's just technically, the colors and the editing and some of the camera movement, it felt Scorsese at times with the montage aspect when the music would come on, counting money and getting rich and the criminality aspect.
Right.
Those moments were the most fun for me. And then you see the actors just get into the zone. Despite the amount of different cameos that appear in this movie and the ins and outs and back and forth of character appearances, disappearances, I had a really good time in Drug King. I think most people out there, especially if you are a fan of Song Kang-ho or any of the actors in this movie, you're going to have a good time as well.
Yeah, or if you're just a fan of like drug-related narratives or these types of drug kingpin, rise and fall type of stories, then I think there's a lot to enjoy here.
It doesn't break that much new ground, but it's a good addition to those types of movies, and especially with the whole Korean side of it. Like it's a new face that we haven't seen before.
And that was by far the most intriguing aspect of it for me, is just to see this kind of film template being implemented into a Korean story. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and there's definitely sequences in this movie that I'm gonna remember. Rather than everything as a whole being so awesome, there was certain segments of this movie that were outstanding.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it like the total package, but it's definitely there's still definitely a lot to be enjoyed.
Yeah. So I would rate this movie just on all the good factors that we mentioned, 7.5 out of 10, which is pretty high. It's a very strong recommendation to check it out.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it just a solid 7. It's not quite the home run that I was hoping it to be, but it's definitely I would definitely still recommend you guys go out and check it out.
Yeah, for me, I'm very satisfied ending the year with this movie. Even though we were hoping it was going to blow through the roof, it was solid. So I hope this video helps you guys when you're thinking about checking out Drug King, and when you do check it out, it's still early, it just came out today, but when you do check it out, please comment below with your thoughts on what you thought about the characters and the movie overall. So until next time, I'm Tyler.
I'm James.
And keep watching movies. Happy holidays.
Bye, guys.